We have some massive news coming out here. The Chicago Bears have officially hired Ben Johnson as their next head coach. And for the Raiders, that is absolutely terrible news because Ben Johnson is, in my opinion, the best quarterback, or I should say the best head coach coming out this cycle. And more than that, I think he's going to be the next great head coach coming out, generally speaking. And he's the guy that most of us wanted. Let's just be honest. This one really, really sucks for the Las Vegas Raiders. This is the guy that could have easily flipped the Raiders into a winning program, and now the Raiders will have to kind of shift and start looking forward to potentially bringing in a different head coach. We'll talk about some of the candidates that I would look at if I'm the Las Vegas Raiders towards the end of this video. But let's talk about what this ultimately means for the Raiders. We had heard over the last week, there are many Raiders insiders, there are many guys that even in the national media were kind of putting it out there that Ben Johnson is, he took an interview with the Raiders, which is something he might not have done previously. And he actually is favoring the Las Vegas Raiders, right? I forget who the report comes out from. It might have been Albert Breer. It may have been one of these other guys. But Ben Johnson was apparently favoring the Las Vegas Raiders. And then we had a ton of other Raiders insiders that were kind of saying the same thing, right? That Ben Johnson is basically going to be the Raiders head coach. And it was Adam Schefter who was kind of putting it out there that he's not 100% sold on that idea, right? Essentially saying that he doesn't think Ben Johnson is 100% committed to the Raiders. And he was 100% right, because literally 2 days after Ben Johnson and the Detroit Lions lost to the Washington Commanders, Ben Johnson's taking a job with the Chicago Bears. And, to me, this hire just comes down to the fact that the Bears have a quarterback. They have a really good offensive line. They have some weapons on the offense side of the football. And to me, I think with Ben Johnson, you have to have a quarterback to have success in the NFL. And the Bears have that, right? They basically have a guy who's about to go into his second year. And this is a quarterback who some people are saying is a generational quarterback, right? And of course, for quarterbacks to have success, no matter who it is, you got to have a good offensive coordinator, right? I 100% believe that even if Patrick Mahomes had someone like Luke Getsy, he wouldn't have success, right? I think even Patrick Mahomes would struggle with a guy like Luke Getsy. So I think to be a good quarterback, you have to have a good offensive coordinator. You have to have a good play caller specifically. And of course, Ben Johnson will be the head coach. He'll be the play caller. To me, this is a great get for the Chicago Bears, no matter how you look at it. And, I thought if the Raiders were able to sell Ben Johnson on the fact that we have some good young defensive linemen under contract, it could have given us an advantage over a team like the Bears. And I do think the Raiders have a better defensive line than the Bears, but the Bears do have some good players as well, right? Javon Dexter, I think, is a really good defensive tackle. They have Montez Sweat, who's obviously pretty good as well. I think Austin Booker is probably another selling point for the Bears. A lot of people don't know who he is. He was a rookie last year. Really, really good football players. Elite pass rusher, right? He's kind of like Maxx Crosby with some crazy-ass moves. He came out of Kansas. I think he was like a 4th or 5th round pick. But regardless of that, the Raiders were unable to land Ben Johnson, and he is going to the Chicago Bears. And it is interesting because the Bears, they have a general manager already in place, and we were told a lot, like, for Ben Johnson to come to the Raiders, a big part of that would be to fire Tom Telesco. And today, the firing of Tom Telesco doesn't really make sense, right? We've seen, over the last 15 years, the Raiders have went through multiple general managers, right? It was Reggie McKenzie for the longest time. McKenzie did an okay job, right? He did draft a lot of guys that didn't really work out, right? Guys like Carl Joseph, Garrett Conley, although they were okay players, they never really panned out to being first-round picks. Then we went into the John Gruden, Mike Mayock era. From there, we went into the Dave Ziegler, Josh McDaniels era, to the most recently Tom Telesco era. And truth be told, Reggie McKenzie had that one really, really good draft in 2014 where we landed both Mack and Carr. But you can make the argument that Tom Telesco in his first year absolutely crushed it as well. Very similar to that 2014 draft. So you can make the argument in a 15-year cycle, the Raiders had arguably their best draft in the 1 year under Tom Telesco. So, taking a step back, the firing of Tom Telesco doesn't make a lot of sense to me at this point. Ben Johnson ultimately goes to the Chicago Bears, who have a really, really good general manager in Ryan Poles. And Poles has been there for years, right? I think 2021 was when they hired him. And he's done all the right things, right? He started a rebuild in 2021. They land their quarterback essentially in the 2024 NFL draft. And they've kind of revamped that team, and it's a good team, right? And they really just needed a coach to kind of come in and put together. And I think Ben Johnson's a great fit for the Chicago Bears. But again, we're told by multiple insiders that being able to kind of restart with the brand new general manager was the right way to go. It doesn't make sense to me at this point, right? I think we're at the point now where, you kind of look forward, and whoever that general manager is that we end up hiring, are we going to get a guy that, Tom Tusk had a really good draft essentially last year. Are we going to get another general manager that can kind of do what Tom Telesco did, or are we going to get another guy like Dave Ziegler, right? A guy that just doesn't know how to analyze defensive linemen, right? Taking guys like Tyree Wilson over Jalen Carter, taking guys like Byron Young, right, who's not here with us any longer, over other multiple defensive tackles that ended up being good, right? Kobe Turner, and even Devon Achan went after the guy we took, right? And the thing is the guy that we took, right, the Byron Young we took, his tape was bad in college, so I'm not surprised he was released after just his rookie year, right? His tape was absolutely bad, and we took him in the 3rd round, which is kind of crazy. But hopefully the Raiders are able to kind of figure it out as they kind of go forward, right? We'll hire a general manager. We'll see which guy they end up picking. I think at this point, bringing in a general manager, just got to get someone that can, evaluate talent, a guy that has some connections. Maybe you move up in the draft. Maybe you go out there and get a quarterback that you think could have success. But, at this point, the Raiders do also got to shift, and they got to start looking at who their next head coach is essentially going to be, right? There's one guy that I think would make a ton of sense for the Raiders, but we haven't brought him in yet. That is Liam Cohn of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's probably not how you say his name, but you guys know who I'm talking about, the offense coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's been really, really solid this past year. He's had a lot of success with the Buccaneers. More than that, he's a guy that some people think as a head coach candidate could be really good as he gets into the NFL and becomes that head coach. And more than just Cohn, right? Maybe it's a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, right? Cliff Kingsbury has done such a phenomenal job with Jaden Daniels, and it's kind of crazy to think because, the Raiders almost hired this guy. And if we did hire a guy like Cliff Kingsbury when we had that opportunity, this season would have been a lot different for the Raiders. I'm 100% convinced that if Cliff Kingsbury was our offensive coordinator, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, whichever quarterback it was that ultimately won under Cliff Kingsbury's system, I am 100% sold that our team would have had so much more success this past season. We would have won more games, would have had more success. And that's the impact of having a good play caller versus not, right? You guys know this because you guys have been watching this channel, and I've been, super, super hard on a guy like Luke Getsy. But I said it before the season, Antonio Pierce's success is going to rely on that offensive coordinator. And Luke Getsy was a terrible offensive coordinator, and I don't think we're going to have success with this guy. And not only did we not have success and he got fired, but AP ultimately lost his job as well. So that tells you the importance of hiring the right person for the job. So I think as you go forward, the Raiders got to figure it out. If you're going to go with Liam Cohn, if you're going to end up going with Cliff Kingsbury as your head coach, you got to then hire the defensive guy as well on the other side. But it seems like the Raiders at this point might actually be leaning towards a guy like Pete Carroll, right? I think some people are saying Pete Carroll's like the option number 2 for the Raiders. So maybe it's Pete Carroll, who, keep in mind, is a defensive guy. If you go down that route, then you got to go out there and get an offensive coordinator that can have success. Shane Waldron's a guy to kind of keep in mind if you go the Pete Carroll route, right? Shane Waldron was with Carroll, I think, for like 3 years before Pete Carroll ultimately got fired, right? I know they don't really call it firing. I think they say, he got like promoted to a different job or whatever. He got fired, right? That's what really happened with Pete Carroll. But Pete Carroll's looking to get back into coaching. I think he's another option for the Raiders. So there's definitely options for the Raiders at this point. But I think it's very, very important that the guy you go with has to be a guy that's proven himself in the past for whatever side of the football he's coaching, right? So like Pete Carroll has proven himself as an actual head coach, right? So there's that. You have that right away. Liam Cohn's been very solid calling plays. Cliff Kingsbury has been very, very solid calling plays. And I know Kingsbury didn't work out his first time as a head coach, but he always had a solid offense, right? And I think when you got a guy that can at least call plays on the offense side of the football, you always have a chance if you get that defensive coordinator hire right. Kellen Moore's another guy who's currently with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's their offensive coordinator, although some people think Kellen Moore is going to be taking the job with the Dallas Cowboys. We'll see if that actually ends up happening. Either way, man, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what ends up kind of happening. Mike McCarthy's another guy that I would absolutely bring in if I'm the Las Vegas Raiders. Mike McCarthy has had success everywhere he's gone, right? He hasn't won a Super Bowl recently, and with the Cowboys, he's kind of struggled. But I think Mike McCarthy's a good coach. I think he knows how to run NFL offenses. And I think he's the type of guy that can get the most out of a quarterback. In my opinion, I don't think Dak Prescott's a good quarterback, right? I think Mike McCarthy made him a lot better than he actually is. And I think Dak Prescott to a point is good, right? If he's making $20 million, he's a good quarterback, but not at like 60 million, right? He's not worth that. So with that, the Raiders have to figure it out. It does suck. Ben Johnson's going to the Chicago Bears. To me, we got to shift focus and we got to figure it out, right? We got to figure out who's going to be that coach, that general manager. We got to figure out the coordinators and just kind of put it together. Tom Telesco firing doesn't make a whole lot of sense, kind of questionable, but you know what? Mark Davis has put the trust in Tom Brady, so we'll see if Tom Brady can actually build a winner for the Raiders. We'll see if Tom Brady can actually end up having the success that some people think he'll have for the Raiders. Obviously, I will continue to criticize anything I don't necessarily agree with. The Tom Telesco one will be one of those things that I'll continue to criticize a little bit until we hire the right guy and that guy can kind of prove it. So we'll see what ends up happening. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.